A decade on and confidence here is being slowly rebuilt. But has 9/11 left global travel traumatized forever?
You know, there was a kind of innocence that was still there, you know, that we've lost.
Also coming up on this week's programme,
how you can rent a local on holiday and Angry Birds takes to the air, literally. That's online check-in later in the show.
and hitting a bum note. The row over singing for your supper in Central Park. Hello, I'm Fiona Foster. Welcome to Fast Track. Behind me is no ordinary downtown building project. This was the site 10 years ago of the deadliest attack ever carried out on US soil. Now, the new World Trade Center is gradually taking shape. But the way we travel is still largely overshadowed by September the 11th, 2001. We've returned to the city to talk to three figures in tourism here, to ask them how much longer they believe that day will continue to dominate the world of travel and tourism.
On September 11th, I was general manager at LaGuardia Airport. It was a gorgeous September morning, not a cloud in the sky.
Warren Cropel was in his car driving to work.
Around 8:45, I get a call from one of my staff saying there's a report of an aircraft that struck the towers. And I was actually a commercial pilot at one time too, so I go, this is strange. And I asked him, is it a Cessna? What was it? And he said, no, they believe it was a 737. And I immediately thought there's something askew at that point. As I came around the bend, I actually saw the second aircraft hit the towers. I saw the fireball from here, just outside LaGuardia.
That morning, hotel magnate Donald Trump was at home in Midtown Manhattan.
I was watching the financial news, and all of a sudden they came on with an alert that something very strange has taken place at the World Trade Center. And then they showed the World Trade Center, and I actually looked at the World Trade Center from my apartment, and I saw tremendous clouds of smoke and fire.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the country in California, Chris Anderson was starting his day as a student.
I had just woken up in the morning to the usual radio show that I'd listened to. And they were talking about the Twin Towers. One of them had fallen down. And usually in the morning, we thought that the radio show hosts were joking. You know, we thought it was a hoax, because there's just no way. I mean, that was completely incomprehensible to think about that happening.
Well, at first the news was reporting that it was a boiler explosion, but I knew, you know, knowing real estate, I knew that boilers aren't at the top of the building, they're at the bottom, and this was the top that was burning so voraciously. And it was just an incredible sight to see this was just an incredible sight. And then all of a sudden you see the second plane come, and you see the second tower likewise boiling at the top and the flames spewing out, and you realized it was terrorism.
At LaGuardia Airport, Warren and his staff swung into emergency mode.
The first thing we did was shut all operations down, have the aircraft return to the gates. And what we did was do a controlled and steady evacuation of the aircraft and the passengers. It was surreal. The World Trade Center was actually our corporate headquarters. We'd lost all communication, so we were basically a lifeboat out here doing what we knew we had to do. The human tragedy initially, you know, we didn't focus on because we had our own job to do. And then once that job was done, then we started, oh my God, what's happening down there? We became very concerned, which was really fueled when the first tower went down.
It was a day of chaos and trauma and disbelief. A decade on, Chris Anderson is visiting the site of the World Trade Center for the first time.
Makes me uncomfortable. Everybody was in shock. You know, there's just this palpable silence. Everybody just couldn't speak, you know, that day.
Everybody just stood back and they were trying to assess the situation, what happened. And I was building a building, we're building a beautiful building in another location of New York, and the second plane flew right over the top of it. So the whole thing was just, it was just a horrible day and a very weird moment for everybody.
At LaGuardia, the loss of life at the Twin Towers was felt very keenly by Warren Crapel and his staff.
We had sent about 30 of our own police officers from the LaGuardia Command down to assist at the Trade Center. And when the first tower went down, we had lost contact with them. So that was the first gut-wrencher of that week, when we thought we'd lost 30 of our own. Very fortunately, that was not the case. But unfortunately, there were 3,000 people who were killed that morning. And 87 of our own Port Authority staff were killed, 12 of whom I knew personally.
The after effects of that day on the travel business are still being felt 10 years on.
Everything has changed since 9/11. I think people forget that though, because they've become so used to how it is now as opposed to how it was before. Before 9/11, you could get on a plane, there wasn't the extreme security measures that we have nowadays, and you felt safe when you traveled. You know, you didn't worry as much about terrorist attacks. You didn't worry about your plane going down. You know, there was a kind of innocence that was still there, you know, that we've lost.
Those increased airport security procedures are perhaps the clearest manifestation of 9/11's legacy.
It started off as pretty, people thought, horrendous because it was kind of casual before. People understand there's a new norm at this point, and it has gotten better. You know, I think the worst was probably about 2 years after the incident, where everything, they were still feeling their way of what to do, what the procedures were. But I think eventually the technology will catch up and will assist.
Another indirect result for travellers has been the introduction by airlines of the notorious practice of unbundling.
What was happening was there actually was a slight recession, a slowdown before that time, before the actual incident, which was basically exacerbated by the incident. Travel just dropped off. Airlines were fighting for their survival.
They had to find some way to recoup after such a disaster. People didn't want to fly. They were nervous, they were scared. And in a lot of ways, you can look at it like September 11th caused baggage fees, caused extra fees, caused boarding pass fees to really come into existence as a viable model for the airline industry to make money. And the consumers don't like it.
But as the industry emerges altered from the shadow of that terrible day, has the joy of travel gone forever?
It depends on what kind of travel you're talking about. If you're talking about, I'm going to go visit my family in San Francisco or Hong Kong or London and I have to get on a plane for 15 hours, depending on the airline that you're on and the experience that they offer you or the individual experience you have going through security, you might not enjoy travel. Now, if you're looking for more of the experiential type of travel, like on the Orient Express, or you're going on a bike ride from Canada down to Mexico, that you're going to enjoy. That is what people are really looking to do. And even airlines they're offering more of that. But you have to get through that remnant of what 9/11 has cost to actually find it.
When I first saw this attack, I said, who would ever fly again? And now they're flying in record numbers. And that's a good thing.
Also making news this week in the world of travel. There have been demonstrations in Sri Lanka over government plans to develop the country's tourism industry as it attempts to rebuild the economy after 3 decades of civil war. Protesters in Colombo claim that land in the west of Sri Lanka is being given to developers, depriving islanders of not only their homes but also their livelihoods.
They want to build up 5-star hotels, golf courts, like a seat-in air taxi services providing, and also using forests and so on for tourism resorts, so which belong to people. So that's why people are unhappy.
The Sri Lankan government says it will push ahead with the development of the country's tourist industry, aiming to double the number of hotel rooms in the country by 2016. Indian low-cost carrier Indigo is going international and will be offering flights between Dubai and Delhi later this month. The airline is the subcontinent's second largest budget carrier and says it'll be offering the first 25,000 passengers on the new route special low fares. And a British woman has described how she feels very lucky to be alive after falling from a ferry and spending 30 minutes in the chilling waters of the North Sea earlier this week. 23-year-old Jenny Anderson says she has no idea how she fell from the deck of the Amsterdam ferry as it made its way through rough seas. The boat's captain is being praised for acting quickly and turning the boat around, meaning that Jenny could be rescued in time.
The ship themselves must have had some fairly slick drills to be able to get her out of the water in the time they did, because you can't underestimate how difficult it is actually just to find a small head bobbing around in a black sea. It really is quite tricky, even with all the specialised equipment that we've got. So I think they did extremely well to get her out in time.
Stay with us here on Fast Track, because coming up after the break, why the fat lady is finally singing for the buskers of Central Park. And we log on to the best in travel on the web. So don't go away.